So in this video I'm going to show you how to solve question 5 on specimen set 3. This one is a question which uses files. It uses a comma separated file. One thing to watch out for is that they are going to give you the comma separated file, so they're going to give you question05 data.txt. If they give that to you, you need to also save it into your completed coding folder, so make sure it goes in there so that you don't have any problems when opening and closing it. So make sure that when you save your code, you save that into completed coding, but also save that file into completed coding from the student coding folder. So copy and paste it in, or open it up and save it again, but make sure it's saved in there. So in this problem, what we need to do is we need to open up a file called Q05 data. It's got a set of integers in sets of 10. It's got multiple lines, and it needs to go through and calculate and report the mean of each line of data. And it's given you a program and a subprogram, and it tells you what the output should look like. So there's the output, and it tells you amend the program and subprograms to meet the following requirements. All data in Q05 underscore data must be processed. Only local variables must be created, so don't create any global variables, and results must be displayed in columnar format using the string.format command. Now, there are some do's and don'ts with this. There are some easy ways to start. There are a few little tricks as we go along that we just need to watch out for. What we're going to do is take the program and just try and break it down section at a time. So if you look at it, we've got our process lines, and it seems to be taking the file name from somewhere as a parameter. And process lines seems to be doing things like getting the line of numbers, calculating the mean, displaying it in columnar format. We've also got another subprogram called display headers, and display headers looks like that is the thing which is going to create our headers, the row and the mean, and our little heading underscore there. Now that bit is probably the easiest bit to create, so we're going to work on that bit first. And in fact, if we look at the way this has been done, display table headers is the thing that's called first, and then it calls process lines second. Now what I'm going to do, just very temporarily, is I'm just going to make sure that when I run it, it doesn't crash. Now what I do know about this is that I need to open and close a file. So let's think about how we're going to do that. So that's the first thing we're probably going to need to do. So we need to give it a file name. So I'm going to call it my file. I'm going to open it. I'm going to use the name of the file itself. Looks like that's coming from here. So that's coming from infile. And I need to open it in order to read it. Now notice I didn't use file name here, and that's because it told me earlier on that it wanted to only use local variables, so it used a constant, passed that constant to here as a parameter, and now I'm using that constant over here. The other thing you need to do, of course, is if you open a file, you need to close it. I'm just going to make sure my tabbing is correct. So I'm going to go my file dot close, and that makes sure that I've opened and closed that file. I've not done anything else with this. I'm just going to leave it as it is and worry now about the table headers. Now, in order to do the table headers, one of the things, if you look at the PLS, that it likes you to do is to use a layout variable. Now, what I'm going to do is, because I know this is question 5, and I know it's going to ask me about, insist on me doing things like proper commenting and proper design, we'll create comments as we go along. So what I want to do is add a comment here which says create the layout string variable. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of space, and I'm following the PLS here, which also creates this layout string. And in there, what I want to do is I'm just going to create an empty string, and now I'm going to fill that up a little bit. I'm going to fill it up with a little bit of data formatting. And I know that the way data formatting works is I need my squiggly brackets, I need my colon, and now I need to think about how am I going to fit all these together. Well, if I look at it, it looks like it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maybe positions. I can play around with that later, and it looks like it's in the middle, so I'm going to center that first one for 6. Remember to get rid of the space, and then I'm going to actually just repeat that, because this next one is going to be my mean. So that's going to format my row and my mean. And what I'm now going to use is I'm now going to display the headers using the layout variable. And in order to do that, that's a very simple print command. Notice I'm using spacing here just to make sure that it's really ultra clear what I'm going to do. So layout.format, following the PLS again. And in here, I just need to put the data, the strings basically, that I want it to display. And I can make sure that that's all spaced out neatly. And then finally, what I need to do is do an underline. And this might need a bit of playing around with, but I know there are probably 12 spaces. I'm going to give myself 15. You might need to play around with this. So display the underline. And again, if you look at the PLS, there's a very simple way to do that. What you can do is you can take any string or character, and if you multiply it by an integer, that will print out 15 of those. So let's just see what that does for us. And I'm not going to worry too much if it crashes, but hopefully it'll work. So there we go. We've got the row, we've got the mean. Probably we've got a few too many there. We can move things around if we need to. I could even put a space here. So I'm just going to put a space in between those two and just see if that tidies it up a little bit. There you go, that's a little bit better. If I wanted to improve it, I could do a little bit later. I could always remove one of these and push that into 14. So you can adjust this until you feel happy. But actually, that's got us quite a long way through getting some marks for this, and also showing that we've got a grasp on how to structure the code and document it. Now, one thing that you'll notice I did is I put in the my file open and my file closed to make sure that it didn't crash on me, that it didn't have anything in there. Let me take these out so that you can see what would happen without them. So notice it will give you an error, and you can't really leave it like that, because if you do, then you're going to struggle to pick up marks from it. So notice you want to have effectively what I had in there, which was these 2 lines, or your alternative is, if you really don't know what is going to happen in there, put the word pass in. And if I do that, you saw that before when we did a slightly longer project on creating a computer game, you'll see that it ignores that. It just says, okay, well, nothing's happening here. So there are a couple of ways to deal with this, depending on how you want to proceed with it. So what I'm just going to do is get myself back to where I was. Okay, so we've got the file. Let's work on this process in file thing. So we are passing a variable, which is a constant, up to here and using it as a parameter. So we're using it as a local variable. And now it starts to tell me, get the line of numbers from the file. And what we want to do is do that one bit at a time. And the easiest way to do it is if you have a look in your PLS, you'll see that what you can do is you can iterate through a file. So iteration going through every single item in a data set. In this case, every single line in a data set. So for each line, I didn't have to create that variable because when you do an iteration, you don't do that in my file. And that gets my iteration going. So that's that bit done. And now it says to me, calculate the mean for the items and adjust the row counter. Well, it looks to me as if I'm going to have to calculate a mean. Well, if I'm going to calculate a mean, I'm going to need some variables in order to do that. And in order to do that, what I'm probably going to have to do is create some basic variables here that I can use. So I'm going to put them underneath here. And in order to do a average or a mean in computer programming or any type of maths, you need to work out the total of all the items. And if I look at it, it looks like these are turning into possibly floating point variables. So possibly the total is going to have to be a floating point variable, but I can adjust that later on. So if I'm not sure about that later, I can always take it away and just check later whether that's working, but it's up to you. I need to have an average that is definitely a floating point. And I also need some way of tracking where I am in the file, because what I need to do is be able to tell it what row I'm on. So I need to have a row variable as well, and that's just an integer. And in fact, I'm going to make that one an integer as well. If I need to adjust it, I will do later on. Okay. And because I need to make it pretty, I also need a layout variable. And again, with these ones, you can, of course, put comments here to explain what each one of those does. So that's the total of all my items, that's the on a line, that's the average for a line, that's the row number I'm on, that's going to be my formatting line. And there might be one or two other things I need in there as well. So I grabbed my line, and what I need to do is actually grab what's inside that line. And there are a couple of ways to do that. Well, if you look at your PLS, what you can do is you can take a string and you can split it up. And if you look at the text file, you'll see that the text file is just made up of 10 integers, and those integers are separated by commas. So we can probably split that in, and when we split it, Python splits it into its own list. So what I'm going to do is create something called line data, and I'm going to have an empty list. So what I want to do, first of all, is split the line by comma into a list. And in order to do that, what I can do is just go line data equals each line, have a look at the PLS, and it will tell you how to split a bit of a string. So each line dot split, and I want to split it by comma. And that creates that list with those 10 items of data in there. Now, at the moment, they're just all strings. So I need to do something with that. And I also need to actually calculate the mean for the items. So what I can do now is I can actually do another iteration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate through the line data list and work out the total. And in order to do that, I'm going to go for the integer in line data. So that's going to go around every single item in that line. And I'm going to add to the grand total the integer, but just be a bit careful. At the moment it's stored as a string, so I need to convert that because otherwise I'm going to run into trouble later on. So there's effectively my total that I've added up for that line. Just going to tidy that up a little bit. And now I can work out the average. So I'm now going to work out the average, and the average equals total divided by, I can use a constant because I know every single one has got 10 numbers per line. And then finally, I need to increase the row number. And I can do that by doing row equals row plus 1. And that's my calculations done. But now what I want to do is I want to display it, and I want to display it in a columnar format. I can use a very similar format to the one before. So actually I'm going to grab this line, and I'm going to be quite careful about how I paste it. So I want it to go directly underneath there. There's my, there I've pasted it. The first thing is that this thing variable here, this looks like it is just a integer. So I need to, if you look at the PLS, to put a D there. That looks like it's formatted to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to put 6.2, and it is a floating point. And now finally, I can print those elements. So print out the row number and the average. And I can use a little bit of what I did earlier, which is this element here. So it helps me that I did that earlier. And layout.format, it's the same variable. And it's just a local variable because I created it up here as well. And what I want to do is, instead of telling it directly what to print out, I want it to print out the row, and I want it to print out the average. So let's just have a save of that and just check what we get. And it looks like we're almost there. We're not quite there yet. We have got it sort of managing to print them out. It's calculating it, but it's got them wrong. So there's a bit of an issue here. So we need to do something about that. So if you think about it, when this thing goes back to the top here, so when it gets to the top of its iteration, it's still using the old total. And it's still carrying on by going total equals total plus the integer. So actually we probably need to reset things, and we probably should reset the average as well. So what I'm going to do is add in something here. I'm going to reset the variables. So I'm going to set the average back to 0.0, so I no longer need to worry about that. And most importantly, I'm going to set the total back to 0. And let's just see what happens when we give that a run. And it looks like we are almost there. Probably still need a little bit of formatting, and still a little bit off here. If you wanted to, you could maybe add another space in here. Let's just see what that does. And we're almost there, pretty much there. It's not perfect, but the alignment just about fits, and the formatting and the data fits. So that's from start to end how I have solved this particular question 5.